located in the front, in the rear, and on the sides of the auditorium. Thank you.
about another round of applause for our gospel choir? Well, good evening, and thank you all for being here, whether you are here with us in person or on the live stream for this very special event. I'm honored to welcome to Clemson Bakari Sellers, one of the leading voices for people across the country, and a South Carolina native from Denmark, South Carolina, a small town about 25 minutes from Orangeburg. I know we will hear some amazing things from him in just a few minutes, but I want to share just a few things about Bakari just to set the stage. He was elected to the South Carolina House of Representatives in 2006 at the age of 22, making history as the youngest member of the South Carolina legislature and the youngest African-American elected official in the nation. So, by the way, just curious, a little quiz. Does anybody know the average age of someone elected in the South Carolina House of Representatives? 65? All right. I'm sure you're trying to Google it really fast. The average age in the House of Representatives is 55, and across the country it's 58, which, to be honest, is still young. But Bakari was 22. Still not even close to the average age of someone in the House of Representatives. He has continued to make history throughout his career in politics and as an attorney and as an analyst, paving the way for people across our country. We're really fortunate to have him with us tonight to share his thoughts and his perspective. I want to thank him for taking the time to be here this evening to help us remember and celebrate the amazing life of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. So I know that we will hear a powerful message from him a little later, and we look forward to his words. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. Make sure you show up to events like this. Let's bring even more people next year when we have this very special event. I want to thank the entire MLK Celebration Committee, led by Rebecca Harkless, director of the Harvey and Lucinda Gant Multicultural Center. I'm thankful for her hard work planning this celebration, and to all on the committee who worked so hard for what's really a wonderful series of events this year focused on the theme of community. Together we thrive, and for that I'm incredibly thankful. If anyone on the committee is here and worked in any way to help with this and the other events, would you please stand so you can accept our thanks? Right down here to my right. Also want to thank Dr. Felicia Benton-Johnson, who serves as our Vice President for Diversity and Inclusive Excellence. Dr. J has been with us a little under a year, and in that time she has elevated the Division of Community Engagement, Belonging, and Access, and worked to create a sense of belonging for everyone who steps foot on our beautiful campus. Would you please help me thank her for her leadership? Also want to thank some members of my executive leadership team, Max Allen, who serves as our Senior Vice President and Chief of Staff, Dr. Bob Jones, who serves as our Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs and Provost, and Dr. Chris Miller, who serves as our Vice President for Student Affairs and Dean of Students, and Julio Hernandez, Assistant to the President for Community Outreach and Engagement. I'm thankful for their outstanding work and commitment as we strive for an environment that promotes inclusive excellence. Would you please help me thank them? So inclusive excellence is a key priority in our strategic plan, Clemson Elevate. If you haven't read the new strategic plan, please do. We're making a lot of progress thanks to the hard work of many people on this campus, many of whom are in the room this evening. We're working to create more opportunities and to provide more support from students from underrepresented populations, and we are reaching out in new ways. I always use my point A when I arrived at Clemson in 2013, so some of the data that I use goes back to when I arrived at Clemson, but if you go back to 2013, our enrollment of underrepresented minority students has more than doubled since that time. We went from 1,800 students of color to more than 3,800 students of color presently. And you all know I'm going to say we have a lot more work to do. In terms of faculty and staff, since 2013, we have seen a 33% increase in the number of African American Hispanic faculty and staff. Many of you know that we have been recognized as a national leader in our efforts across the university, receiving the HEED Award, Higher Education Excellence and Diversity Award from Insight into Diversity magazine for the 7th straight year. And we recently received the Diversity Champion Award for the 6th consecutive year, one of a very few select universities to hold this honor. There's only 14 or 15 in the country, and we're one of only a few who have received this award multiple years in a row. As you know, that does not mean we're perfect. We are not, but it means we have really good people and really good programs in place, and we're making really good progress. Our Men of Color National Summit and our Women's Roundtable have become sellout events to literally thousands of people from across the nation that participate in these really powerful sessions. If you haven't been to those, I would encourage you to participate. And through key programs, some that I absolutely treasure, Emerging Scholars and Call Me Mister, we're supporting the future trailblazers of our state, the nation, and beyond. We're on a mission to increase access to education and to continue building an environment that promotes inclusive excellence. This past year, we honored the 60th anniversary of desegregation on our campus, which started with Harvey Gantt and followed soon thereafter with his wonderful wife, Cindy. There are many reasons to celebrate our success to this point, but we must all agree it's an ongoing process and the work continues. And although we are making important progress, we have more important work to do. I hope that the events of the MLK celebration will encourage a lot of thoughtful discussion on our campus that we can all be engaged in about how do we keep moving forward and keep making progress towards being the best university for everyone. I want us to engage in conversations. If you think about the strategic plan, Clemson Elevate, how can we create the #1 student experience for all of our students? How do we continue to expand research that involves all of our students? And how can we positively impact and transform all of the lives across this great state and beyond? My hope is that we can use tonight to elevate Clemson and to continue those discussions and become a national model where everyone feels welcome and valued, in a place where everyone can succeed. And you know what? I need you, and Clemson needs you, and we're all counting on you to help as we continue to make a difference. Finally, I'm proud that we have a 42-year history of celebrating the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I want to thank you again for all being here tonight, and we look forward to our keynote address and the presentation of the MLK Excellence in Service Awards. So I hope you enjoy the program. This is always one of my favorite nights of the year. I would now like to turn the program over to Anthony Mitchell, President of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity here at Clemson. May God bless you all, and go Tigers.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Anthony Mitchell, and on behalf of the 2024 MLK Planning Committee, the Gantt Multicultural Center, and the Pi Alpha chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, I'm excited you chose to join us for Clemson's 42nd annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. commemorative service. Thank you again to President Clements for that great welcome. The MLK Planning Committee has worked hard to bring you a great program this evening, and we appreciate you taking the time out your schedule to be here with us. I want to extend a special thank you to President Clements, Dr. Felicia Benton-Johnson, and Provost Bob Jones for their presence here tonight and tremendous support for the MLK celebration. Tonight is a very special night. For the past 42 years, Clemson University has taken the time to pause, recognize, and celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Tonight, in the interest of time, I will not read through the entire history of our celebration. However, we do have a detailed history of the celebration in the program and encourage each of you to take a moment to read and learn about our history here at Clemson. With passion and persuasion, Dr. King called upon our nation to match its words with deeds to make the American dream a reality for all, regardless of race, religion, class, or background. This is a great time to honor and celebrate a man who led a movement, a man willing to give his life freely for a cause that he believed in. In the spirit of this year's theme, Community, Together We Thrive, our goal is to critically engage the campus community in reflecting, honor, and recognizing the commitment of so many who gave their lives during the Civil Rights Movement, of the past and present, and in turn, challenge ourselves to continue these legacies together. As you can see, we have an outstanding program tonight. We will kick tonight's program off by honoring members of our Clemson community. I will now ask Dr. Felicia Ben Johnson, Vice President for Diversity and Inclusive Excellence, to tell us more about the MLK Excellence in Service Awards that will be awarded tonight. Thank you.
I will echo everyone and say good evening, and I am so excited that you have chosen to join us tonight for this MLK celebration. And I would also like to thank President Clemens as well as Anthony for that warm welcome to our guests, and most definitely to our honorary guest, Bakari Sellers. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come tonight. So every year, the President's Office is proud to award the Martin Luther King Jr. Award for Excellence in Service. These deserving individuals exhibit excellence in service one or more of the following areas, involving and advancing Dr. King's vision of the beloved community. And service is what's near and dear to not just my heart, but those in Clemson's community. And that beloved community focuses on service to Clemson University or the surrounding community, advocacy for social or environmental injustice, service above and beyond direct employment. Dr. King's defined beloved community as a community inclusive of all people, regardless of race, gender, class, ethnicity. A community that recognizes people as individuals first, each with a unique set of life experiences that shapes their particular perspectives. A community where varied perspectives are brought together in a collective effort to achieve goals for the common good. The common good. I will now ask Timothy Stanfield, Assistant Vice President and Executive Director of the Gantt Center, to come to the podium as I join President Clemens in honoring our award recipients and showing Clemson community what it means to have a beloved community and that of service.
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Felicia Benton Johnson. We are proud to honor each of these honorees this evening for part of our Clemson University community. Our first award goes to a current Clemson undergraduate student. This is what the nominator said about our awardee. He serves in numerous capacities that are often done quietly and humbly, chiefly among these within the Call Me Mr. program, where he has done much of the work of Dr. King in an educational setting regarding advocacy. Call Me Mr. is a teacher preparation program that prepares education majors for students within the South Carolina classroom. He has served as president of the Call Me Mr. on campus for multiple terms. He serves in a way that influences the next generation to do and be better, and answers the Dr. King's call to act in service. He has worked in literacy camps to improve reading and writing levels at Camp Rock in Pickens County, Spartanburg District 7 in Spartanburg County, West Oak Middle in Oconee County, and Kids on Point in Charleston, South Carolina. He also serves frequently at Helping Hands, a local group home for boys' foster kids, making an impact on another marginalized community that is often misunderstood and overlooked. Please join me in congratulating Caleb Brown on receiving the 2024 MLK Excellence in Service Award. Caleb, please join us on stage. Our next award is going to our faculty/staff member. This is what the nominator said about the awardee. Through his work with empowering rural communities, exploring ways to counter food insecurities, addressing race and racism in rural America, and other related topics, Dr. Robinson has fostered inclusivity, fought discrimination, and championed the rights of marginalized communities. His service to the university and the surrounding community has been exemplary. Dr. Robinson's community involvement has included serving on 2 City of Clemson steering committees as the city began addressing the rampant growth, especially in student housing. Dr. Robinson was one of a group of interested citizens who wanted to develop some form of housing nonprofit. He was instrumental in forming the local nonprofit G.R. Shaw Center for Housing and Economic Growth. The Shaw Center is now thriving and regularly improving the housing and daily lives of homeowners in the minority neighborhoods in Clemson. Please join me in congratulating Dr. Kenneth Robinson on receiving the 2024 MLK Excellence in Service Faculty Award. Dr. Robinson, please join us on stage. Our final award will be awarded posthumously to our dear friend of the Martin Luther King Celebration Committee. The nominator writes, I had the pleasure of serving as the Clemson University MLK Celebration Chair from 2015 to 2020. And the late Dr. Joe Stewart preceded me in his service on this committee and continued once I rolled off, spanning his service to this university and to MLK Committee over decades. He had been a fixture of the MLK community for decades, offering his expertise and perspective as an esteemed professor of political science. His research interests span civil rights, policies, racial and ethnic politics, public policy, educational policy, and public law. His work has appeared in various political science, education, public policy, public administration, public law, and interdisciplinary journals. 3 of his books, Race, Class, and Education with Kenneth Meyer and Robert England, 1989, The Politics of Hispanic Education with Kenneth Meyer, 1991, and Can We All Get Along? Racial and Ethnic Minorities in American Politics with Paula McCain, 5th edition, 2010, have received Myers Awards as outstanding books on the subject of human rights in the United States. Needless to say, it was a privilege to have him and his wealth of knowledge on the committee. While planning the MLK civil rights trips over the years to various locations, including Alabama, North Carolina, and Tennessee, Dr. Stewart would pull out former and current voting district maps to help create a well-rounded learning experience for the students participating on the trip, as well as providing learning opportunities for the committee members that have sat alongside him during the planning. Beyond serving as an amazing and thoughtful scholar to the MLK committee, Dr. Stewart was an overall esteemed colleague and human being. He provided great humor and sparked laughter in committee meetings and was stopped by the Gantt Center Multicultural Center when he had a chance heading to his office in Brackett Hall to say friendly hellos or to staff members and to students. Over the last couple of years, Dr. Stewart offered to donate his vast collection of books to the Multicultural Resource Library in the Gantt Multicultural Center. He donated so many books that we had to buy more bookcases. This act of selflessness and gift of learning epitomizes the character of Dr. Stewart. He made a significant impact on Clemson, higher education, and beyond with his life and his career, and we are eternally grateful. Please join me in honoring Dr. Joseph Stewart for his commitment and dedication to Clemson. The award will be accepted by his wife, Ms. Paula Sutherland. Let's give our honorees another round of applause. Next, I will bring up Tiana Rice, who will introduce tonight's keynote speaker.
Good evening. I am Tiana Rice, and I am a psychology major and a sociology major from Denmark, South Carolina. And it is my honor to introduce the keynote speaker, Mr. Bakari Sellers. Two-time New York Times best-selling author, civil rights activist, attorney, entrepreneur, legislator, and overall prolific voice of the culture. Bakari Sellers continues to build upon the strong legacy he inherited as the son of Gwendolyn Sellers and civil rights leader Cleveland Sellers. While his dad helped shape movements working alongside Stokely Carmichael, Bayard Rustin, and Malcolm X, Bakari has come into his own helping to write the blueprint for today's movements with the likes of Representative James Clyburn, Attorney Benjamin Crump, and President Barack Obama. Bakari forged his own path from very early on. He entered Morehouse College at the age of 16. He went on to become a graduate of the University of South Carolina Law School, and he became the youngest legislator in the South Carolina State Legislature at 22. He carries this mantle of success with the right balance of gravitas, style, generosity, and humility, a nod to his humble beginnings in Denmark, South Carolina, where please and thank you are the chief currency in town. In penning both his memoir, My Vanishing Country, and a children's book titled Who Are You People?, Bakari pays homage to the working class values that encouraged him to dream with his eyes wide open, and that are the predicate for his persistent fight for diversity, equity, and inclusion in the U.S. and abroad. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Bakari Sellers to the stage.
That's my homegirl right there. I had to figure out who her people were, where she grew up at. Good evening. How's everyone doing today? My name is Bakari Sellers, and it is a privilege and an honor to be here with you all on this day that we celebrate Martin Luther King, Jr. Before I begin, I am from the big city of Denmark, South Carolina, where we got 3 whole stoplights and a blinking light. But my mom and dad would always tell me that the 2 most important words in the English language are the words thank you, and they are not nearly said enough. I want to start by thanking the individuals who won these awards today. The 3 individuals who are here or represented here today. One who may his memory be a blessing, and the other 2 who are doing the work while they're here. Give them another round of applause. I think I think it's very important, as you know, we have this saying down south, it's very important to give people their flowers while they're living. I also want to say a special thank you to Rebecca Harkless. I don't think people who put together programs, who are behind the scenes, who make things go, get the credit they deserve often enough. And so I don't know where she is. She's probably running around. So there she in the corner under the exit sign. I give her a round of applause as well. And last but not least, it is very, very, very difficult to be a college president in these United States of America. To be focused on ushering young people through the maturation process while maneuvering through the politics of the day, navigating the lessons that need to be taught and those that need to be learned while maintaining who you are and remaining steadfast and true is quite difficult in 2024. And so I just wanted to say thank you to your president in his 10-year anniversary, if I'm not mistaken. My father was a college president at Voorhees, and Dr. Clements, he said that you stay a college president until you get tired of the board or the board gets tired of you. And so I just want to say thank you. Give your president a round of applause. I travel all around the country, and I speak on a lot of college campuses, and it's important that your president's actually here. That shows that that is intentional and purposeful, and I think that means a lot. But even more importantly, I can tell you that I stand before you today a little bit tired. I don't know how many of you all were watching the Iowa primary last night. I have a ladybug on my hand. That must mean something. And I apparently drew the short stick at CNN. If any of you all got up to pee last night, I was on TV from 1 to 5 a.m. and then did the morning show from 5 to 5:30 and caught a flight back here that was delayed because as you go further north, they have this white stuff that falls from the sky. We don't have that in Denmark, South Carolina. But I wanted to be here in this particular moment, and I've been thinking about my remarks and praying about my remarks. And on my ride up from Columbia, spending a lot of time and thought without the radio on about my words here today. You know, may the meditation of my heart and the words of my mouth be acceptable. And so I began to think about life and the confusion that many of us have, in particular when it comes to a man like Dr. King. Many of us believe life to be a singular step instead of a collection thereof. And so today I want to talk to us all about the journey that we find ourselves on together. And the unique thing about this is every teacher or professor, any professors or teachers in the room, or pastors or whatnot, they will tell you that when they begin to speak to an audience and they want to take the audience somewhere, they have to explain to them what the destination is. And so today I want to have a conversation about a journey to excellence. I believe on a campus of higher education, that I believe would be appropriate. I also know that you all play tonight. It's an ACC game at 9 o'clock. My Gamecocks play at 9 o'clock as well, home game against Georgia. And so I'm going to treat you all like Elizabeth Taylor treated all 7 of her husbands. And that means I'm not going to keep you long. But I do want to have this conversation about a journey to excellence, and I want to build off on this journey by asking you two very simple questions. And I have to apologize beforehand, particularly to Rebecca, who's probably the reason why I'm here, for bombarding you with questions that are rooted in such simplicity, but I believe them to be necessary to answer as we navigate this journey to excellence. Whether or not you're P.J. Hall, or whether or not you are Dr. Clements, or whether or not you are a freshman trying to find your way, or whether or not you are a janitor on campus, or the head chef, or the person who will graduate in the class of 2024 as summa cum laude, you must spend some time asking yourself, how far have we come, and where do we go from here? Two very, very simple questions that Dr. King usually challenged the consciousness of a community. He challenged themselves and many others to ask themselves those two very simple questions. And this is unique because we find ourselves in the cradle of the civil rights movement, that when I ask the question, how far have we come, I can use historical context. And this is historical context that we should all know, although we do not. I like to think back to 1946, and there was a young man named George Elmore. George was unique. How many of you all know George Elmore? Raise your hand. George was unique because he was so fair-skinned that he could pass for being white. They deemed George Elmore to be a Renaissance Negro. Because in 1946, in Hopkins, Lower Richland County, South Carolina, George Elmore, he actually owned a 5 and dime store, a liquor store, drove cabs, and took pictures on the side in 1946. But George decided he was going to try to register to vote, and so George went down to the Richland County Office of Voter Registration, and you know they gave George his voter registration card. But in August of that year, George tried to go down and cast his ballot. And who are the nosiest people in all the world? Poll workers. Ain't nobody nosier than a poll worker. I think that's a prerequisite to be a poll worker. You just got to be nosy. And the poll worker said, George, we know who you are. You're a Negro. You can't vote here. But George was filled with faith and audacity, so George Elmore filed a lawsuit. It was known as Elmore versus Rice. And as soon as he filed that lawsuit, they firebombed his liquor store. They stopped distributing to his 5 and dime store. His wife literally died in a mental health hospital from having to undergo the trauma of the crosses being burned on her yard, etc. George Elmore died a very broken man emotionally, mentally, and financially. But Elmore versus Rice is the reason that black folk in this country can vote in primaries. So again, ask yourself the very simple question, how far have we come? I like to think about Sarah Mae Fleming. Who knows the name Sarah Mae Fleming? She's also from right there. You're going to have to keep your hand down over there. He know everybody. Also from Richland County, she was what I like to say is the baddest woman in the movement. She was a 22-year-old domestic worker. She cleaned up local hotels in Columbia. And on Main Street one day, she had just gotten off work, she and her girlfriend, and they got on the bus. And back then, I don't think anybody in this room is old enough, but back then, the public transportation and the buses were owned by SCE&G, by the utility companies. And she got on the bus, but her sin wasn't sitting at the front of the bus. Her sin was that when the bus driver told her to get off the bus, she didn't go out the back door that the colored used. She went out the front door, and the bus driver grabbed her by the back of the neck and punched her in the stomach and rode her down the steps. Sarah was dynamic, and her story speaks to me because it reminds me of when I was about to speak at the DNC, and I saw John Lewis in 2016. It was right before Hillary Clinton was scheduled to speak. They allowed me an opportunity to say a few words, and everyone down where I'm from or who knows me calls me Little Cleve or Little CL, and I heard this booming voice, and they said, Little Cleve, and I turned around, and it was Congressman Lewis, and he said, make sure you're always prepared to walk onto the pages of history. You see, Sarah Mae Fleming was unique because she was prepared to walk onto the pages of history. I am the furthest thing from a pastor. If anybody has ever seen me drink tequila, they'll tell you that. But it reminds me of the book of Isaiah, when Isaiah was in the full awe and glory of the Lord. And the question was asked, who shall go for me? And Isaiah said, here am I, Lord, send me. Some of y'all need to go to Bible study on Wednesdays. See, Sarah wasn't looking to make history that day. Instead, she said, here am I, Lord, send me. And she joined with some young enterprising lawyers from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and Sarah Mae Fleming laid the foundation in action and law for another young lady who sat down some 16 months later named Rosa Parks. So again, ask yourself that very simple question, how far have we come? And last but not least is a story that we're really all familiar with in this room. It's a story of Harry and Eliza Briggs. They're from the barbecue capital of the world, down from Clarendon County, South Carolina. And Harry and Eliza Briggs wanted their young people to have the opportunity to ride school buses. It's 1949. You know how your grandparents tell you these stories about how they had to walk to school uphill both ways? 37% of that is true. Back then, black students in 1949 didn't have access to transportation, so many times they would have to wake up at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning to walk to their separate but equal schools. And Harry and Eliza Briggs, they didn't want increased teacher pay, they didn't want new this or new that. All they wanted was school buses, and so they sued the school superintendent, and that case was known as Briggs v. Elliott. The unique thing about the history of this great state is that Briggs v. Elliott was the first case that was filed in the landmark collection of cases known as Brown versus the Board of Education. See, people forget that one of the most consequential, if not the most consequential, Supreme Court case in our history actually started right here in South Carolina. And in Brown versus the Board of Education, Chief Justice Warren got a very rare unanimous opinion. He held that segregation causes a sense of inferiority by placing children in environments not conducive to learning. Think about that. He said segregation causes a sense of inferiority by placing children in environments not conducive to learning. Now, some of y'all are looking at me strange. Being able to remember the holding of Brown is not brilliance, but that's what $100,000 worth of law school debt will get you. But think about that and then ask yourself that very simple question: how far have we come? Think about George Elmore, and George Elmore gave everything that he had so that he could have that franchise, so that he could have that right to cast a ballot. But we live in a community now where there is an entire generation that doesn't understand the import or the price that was paid for that franchise. Or even more importantly, if it wasn't so important and valuable, people wouldn't work so hard to try to take it from you. So again, ask yourself that very simple question: how far have we come? Think about Sarah Mae Fleming, and all she wanted was access to public transportation. But we live in communities now where black and brown and marginalized and poor folk don't have access to public transportation or affordable housing, live in food deserts, don't have OBGYNs in their county, and don't even have clean water. Am I lying? What if I told you there were 100 cities in these United States of America that had less potable water than Flint, Michigan? So again, ask yourself that very simple question: how far have we come? And then think about Harry and Eliza Briggs, who had the audacity and the vision and the fortitude in 1949 to lay the foundation so that we could overturn Plessy v. Ferguson and separate but equal. Just parents of kids thinking about what was best for their children. The argument about whether or not parents should be involved in schools is so funny, because from South Carolina, we're like, definitely the answer is yes. Because we know the history and legacy of Harry and Eliza Briggs and what they mean to this country. But yet and still, we live in a community and a state where we still have a corridor of shame, where kids go to school and their heating and air don't work, where we still have open air schools. Y'all know what those are? Where the hallways are not cemented in, but they're just breezeways, I think is what you call them. Ask yourself that very simple question: how far have we come? We live in a community where kids are punished, literally in South Carolina, because of the zip code that you're born into. So President Clemson, in my 39 years of great wisdom, I have come to the resolve that the answer to the question, how far have we come, is that we've made a great deal of progress, but we still have yet a ways to go. And the unique thing about asking this question is whether or not you are from the upstate in Pickens or Oconee County, or whether or not you're from the low country in Bamberg, Barnwell, Colleton County, whether or not you are black or white or Democrat or Republican. I think the essence of the question, how far have we come, is a caveat. If you're intellectually honest, is that we'll all come to the same conclusion. That we recognize the achievements that we've made, but recognize that there still is yards to earn. So now we have to pivot and ask ourselves the next question, which is, where do we go from here? And I can tell you it's a question that I find to be extremely difficult to answer. I actually am asking you this question. It's one of my pet peeves when people do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm asking you this question that I don't really know the answer to. It's the question that keeps me up at night. It's the question that makes my chest feel uncomfortable. Where do we go from here? In fact, Dr. King, I don't often talk about Dr. King. In fact, I usually confine my remarks about Martin Luther King Jr. to Martin Luther King Day. I very rarely, outside of this moment in time, talk about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. because I really don't appreciate the way that he's taught in American history. Many people look at Dr. King as if he was some docile individual, when Martin Luther King Jr. was a rabid revolutionary. People forget what he stood for, or the fact that his last Gallup approval rating was taken in 1963-64, about 4 years before he was assassinated, and his approval rating in this country was about 32 or 34%. His approval rating, Martin Luther King Jr.'s approval rating, was lower than both Joe Biden and Donald Trump at the lowest points in their career. He was not a very well-liked man. And then he was taken from us in the most visceral way possible. People try to act like he just died in his sleep. But he was ripped from us and drove a country almost to the brink of pulling apart. But we remember his legacy. We remember what he left us. We remember his oratory. We remember his writings. And his second best piece of writing is a book entitled, Where Do We Go From Here? Now, his best piece of writing is what? If you say that I have a dream speech, we will fight after this. I have a theory about the I have a dream speech. It's really not that good of a speech, but that's a whole nother thing. His best piece of writing is the letter from the Birmingham jail. You know, there's a weird factoid about the I have a dream speech. The majority of that speech he had given a few weeks before. He had given at a union hall in Michigan. And Dr. King was a great orator and great pastor, and so as he was delivering this speech, he realized that the crowd wasn't moving. It wasn't with him. And then Mahalia Jackson was behind him. And she shouted to him, "Tell him about that dream you had." And then he began to go into this unplanned riff of I have a dream that one day we shall. But if you read that speech, and then you read the letter from the Birmingham jail, you may stumble across this little book entitled, Where Do We Go From Here? And I was thinking about my remarks today and thinking about that book because today we're talking about community, and in that book, in the answer to the question, where do we go from here, Dr. King gave us two choices. He said we could either have chaos or we could have community. Those were the two choices he gave us. And so many of you all see me on CNN. Some of you all may watch Fox, and that's cool. My mom was talking the other night about watching Joy Ann Reid. I was like, Mom, that's the wrong channel. But underneath me, there's usually a box that just simply says chaos. It says chaos at 1600 Pennsylvania, or chaos in the House Majority Caucus, or chaos in Gaza, or chaos in Ukraine, or chaos in Wall Street. It just feels like chaos. We pick up the newspaper, and above the fold, it could just really read just chaos. But the challenge for everybody who's under the sound of my voice, the challenge for this institution of higher learning, the challenge from everyone from the football team to the president's office and everybody in between, is to build community. Let me tell you a story about a young man who was actually born on Frederick Street. 633 Frederick Street. When he was 10 years old, something happened that fundamentally changed his world. It was 1955. It was a room much like this, and he will tell you that the strongest person that he ever knew was a woman named Mamie Till. Mamie was a bad woman, and Mamie decided that when her son Emmett was brutally beaten, she was going to have an open casket. It was in a room much like this, in front of a pulpit or well much like this one, and flowers just like that. And at the bottom, they had an open casket with a 13-year-old boy who lay in it, who had allegedly whistled at a white woman. And his penalty was a death sentence whereby her husband and brothers lynched him and threw him in a river in Mississippi. I don't know how many of you all have seen the picture, but but please feel free to take your phones out and Google Emmett Till casket photo. His face was so brutalized that it looked like a pancake. And, you know, there were no bones left intact. And Mamie Till, Emmett's mother, said she wanted to have an open casket because she wanted the world to see what racism and bigotry and hate had done to her boy. But back then in 1955, before you could go viral on Twitter or Snapchat or Instagram, you went viral in Ebony magazine. Every black person in this country had an Ebony magazine on a table in the den, and they had a jet in the bathroom. Those are just facts. It's like every church, every black church you go into got a picture of black Jesus, Martin Luther King, and now they got Barack Obama up there. Those are just staples of black households. But a lot of people around that time in 1955, they would rip that picture of Emmett in the casket out. They would fold it up and they would put it in their wallet, and it would spur the activism. This young man from Denmark actually began to lead the youth chapter, the NAACP, and he led marches and sit-ins in Little Denmark. But his parents felt some type of way because they felt not only for his security, knowing the story of Emmett, but their own economic security, knowing the story of people like George Elmore. And so this is when the story has a bit of irony in it. They wanted this young man from Denmark to get out of the movement, and so they sent him to Howard University, which makes sense to nobody. And to compound that, when he got to Howard University, his roommate and ended up being his best friend was Stokely Carmichael. And Stokely was a little bit older, and Stokely actually graduated from Howard and then convinced this young man from Denmark to drop out of school. He did. He dropped out of school, and he helped found this small fledgling civil rights organization called the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, also known as SNCC. And they got paid $8 a week. And another random factoid, since I'm in an institution of higher learning, I'll share this with you. One of his first missions was to go to Miami University of Ohio. Miami University of Ohio is not written about a lot in our history books, but Miami University of Ohio was a bastion of freedom. Civil rights workers went to Miami University of Ohio to train before they went down to Mississippi and Alabama for Freedom Summer. And while he was at Miami University of Ohio, he got a phone call that 3 of his friends had gone missing: Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney. They had gone just completely missing. So this young man from Denmark actually led the search mission down to look for these 3 individuals. They went to Philadelphia, Mississippi. How many of y'all have ever been to Philadelphia, Mississippi? It's the size of this auditorium. And during the day, they would hide in barns and sheds, and at night they would go out and look in ditches and trenches, but they couldn't wear any boots or wear any buckles or anything shiny because they didn't want to be caught. And ironically enough, they found these 3 bodies behind the home of one of the local sheriff's deputies and ministers in the town. That was his first indoctrination into the movement. He ended up becoming national field director and program secretary under the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee under both John Lewis and Stokely Carmichael. And then he came back home. He actually came back to South Carolina and became involved in the most deadly civil rights demonstration this country's ever seen. You know, I share this story around the world because not many people know it. And I tell this story quite often because it's really erased from our history books. But it was February 6th of 1968, not far from here, I would say. It's probably 2 hours and 50 minutes in Little Orangeburg, South Carolina, where the students at State decided they were going to protest the All-Star Bowling Alley. Now, the All-Star Bowling Alley is unique because it was on Russell Street, right downtown Orangeburg. Y'all know what a Dario is in Orangeburg, where they got them good pineapple milkshakes? It was right across the street from the Dario in that right angle. And the last vestige of discrimination, Jim Crow's final hiding place, is how they described it. And 3 students were supposed to go in on the night of February 6th and sit down and get arrested. And they were going to fight that segregation, that injustice in the court of law. But they didn't know that city police and state troopers were already on the inside of the building. And so it sits in a right angle, and as the students begin to clap and chant and sing protest hymns, city police and state troopers begin to surround the students. And they begin to press up against the students, and the students begin to press up against the glass, and then the glass broke. And when the glass broke, all hell broke loose. And the police began to beat the students, but they beat them not with normal police batons, but they beat them with batons that were about this long, and at the end they had these leather rawhide whips. And John Stroman would tell the story about seeing 2 state troopers hold one young lady while another one beat her. And the students that night, they had to go back to their campus and heal not only their physical wounds, but their mental wounds and emotional wounds as well. And then came February 7th, 1968. Older folk had this saying, that tension's so thick that you could cut it with a knife. For me, it's kind of like, I went to Morehouse, and it's like our rival was Clark Atlanta, and you're in the parking lot after the game, and you feel like something about to pop off. That's what the tension was like on February 7th. But nothing happened. And then came that fateful day of February 8th, 1968, where the students decided that they were going to protest the All-Star Bowling Alley again. But this time when the police came, they got the right idea, and they went back to their campus. They went back to their campus. They went back to their campus because they felt safe in their numbers. They felt safe in their communion because they were gathered together much as for the same reason that we've gathered here today, for a singular cause and a common good. And you can imagine how it's not too cold, but it's cool in February, and how the embers would illuminate the darkness and the warmth from the fire would warm your bones ever so gently. And they built this huge bonfire, and they began to sing and clap and chant, but the students did not foresee what would happen next. They did not foresee that South Carolina state troopers would line up along the embankment in front of their beloved campus. They did not foresee that they would have shotguns that were loaded with deadly double-aught buckshots of the same bullets we use to hunt deer. They did not foresee that they would be turned on them with deadly intent. And for 8 seconds, 1,001, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 shots were fired into the group of students. It killed 3, Henry Smith, Samuel Hammond, and Delano Middleton, and wounded another 28. This young man from Denmark was one of the ones wounded. He was shot in the shoulder that night. And when he went to the infirmary on the campus, they told him there was nothing they could do for him there. He had to go to the hospital. He went to the hospital, and he was pointed out by the only black sheriff's deputy in Orangeburg County at the time, and he was arrested. They deemed him to be an outside agitator because he was a member of SNCC, and they knew who he was. And he was charged with 5 felony counts, looking at a maximum of 75 years in prison. I-26 between Orangeburg and Columbia was shut down for the first and only time in this state's history. Everyone who was on was made to get off, and no one was allowed on as he was transported from the Pink Castle, which is what they called the Orangeburg City Jail, to CCI. And the reason that they sent him to CCI, y'all remember CCI on Broad River? The reason they sent him there was because when his bond was denied, they didn't want him in normal population, so they actually housed him on death row just to add a little salt to the wound. And in between the night of February 8th, 1968, and this young man from Denmark's trial, all 8 officers who fired shots into the group of students were tried, and they were all found not guilty. This young man from Denmark went to trial, and the lead investigator from SLED recalled that too much time had passed. He had misplaced the evidence, but he himself was a witness, and that he recalled this young man from Denmark not on the night of the 8th, but on the night of the 6th, standing on top of a fire truck, lighting a bic and saying, "Burn, baby, burn." And so most of his charges were dismissed, but his indictment was backdated from February 8th to February 6th on one charge, which was rioting. And he was charged, tried, and convicted of rioting, becoming the first and only one-man riot in the history of this country. I share that story because on that night, injustice had left mothers without their sons. It left the pages of our state's history stained red with blood. The history books now refer to that as the Orangeburg Massacre. Many people don't talk about it or know about it. We know about Kent State. Some, to a certain extent, know about Jackson State, but very few know about South Carolina State. But if you look at this young man from Denmark that night who ended up being the only person ever incarcerated for the events of that night, wounded, still with a little piece of metal in his shoulder, and you ask him what's the greatest sacrifice he had to make, and you see that his eyes don't pop like they used to from shedding the tears of so many loved ones lost, or his shoulders aren't as upright as they once were from carrying the burdens of a generation. He'll tell you the greatest sacrifice he had to make was not being in jail or losing his freedom per se, But the greatest sacrifice he had to make was being in jail for the birth of his oldest daughter, or my big sister. Because this young man from Denmark who grew up into a civil rights hero is my father, Dr. Cleveland Sellers. And the lessons that I learn from individuals as we are in this period of time where we study the words of Dr. King and we move into Black History Month is that the lessons of people like Medgar Evers and Emmett Till and Jimmy Lee Jackson and Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker and Marion Barry and Julian Bond and Ruby Bridges and all of those individuals, even before you get to the Martins, Malcolms, and Rosas, is that the answer to the question, where do we go from here, lies fundamentally in the ability for us to do two things. And the first is more aspirational than something that I do. You know how in church they say, he ain't done with me yet? So he ain't done with me yet. But the first thing we have to dedicate ourselves to is loving our neighbor. No, I'm not finished. There's a ... Because there are a lot of people in this room who feel put upon, who feel oppressed, who feel pushed to the side. There are women in this country who feel as if they can't make choices of their own. There are individuals who feel like they can't come outside because of who they love. There are immigrants who feel as if they're persecuted because they want to be here for a brighter future. And they sometimes feel like they're on the floor. You know, my grandmother would say when I was younger, she would always say that you can't fall off the floor. And to somebody who was 8, that didn't make any sense. But as I got older, I began to realize that there are a lot of us who feel like we're on the floor. And the first lesson of Dr. King, as we answer this question of where do we go from here, we have to dedicate ourselves to loving our neighbors even when they don't love us. And that's damn hard. You have to love your neighbors even when they don't love you. That's a different type of love. That's an unabridged, unshackled, free type of love. He ain't done with me yet because I'm not just at that point in my life. I want to be there, but that requires an extra sense of self. The second thing we have to do is we used to be a people of dreamers, but we have to learn how to dream with our eyes open again. You know, the funny part, Dr. Clemens, is that I just have this really, really elementary view of teaching young people. Like, I don't believe that you can teach a young black kid that they can be a doctor if they've never seen a black doctor before. You know, I don't think that you can teach a Hispanic kid that they can be a scientist if they've never seen a Hispanic scientist. But we have to begin to be those examples and teach young people that you too can be anything you truly want to be, allowing them to touch our proverbial hair. And then and only then, I think, can we get to our final destination. Because on this journey, we've challenged ourselves with 2 questions. I think you realize that those questions are a little bit more loaded than we gave them credit for. But how far have we come? We've realized, regardless of the historical context that you use in your own life, you've made progress, but we still have yet a ways to go. And then you pivot and you ask, where do we go from here? You recognize that I came here today and I don't have the answers, but I have the guideposts, which means that you have to love your neighbor even when they don't love you. And you have to be willing to dream with your eyes open. And then you get to that destination of excellence. And excellence looks like, to the young people in the room, if you want to be a doctor, being David Satcher. If you want to be a politician, being Nelson Mandela. If you want to be a lawyer, being Thurgood Marshall. The greatest educator of all time, and respectfully to anybody in this room, you could be number 2, but the greatest educator of all time is a young man named Benjamin Elijah Mays. He's from Greenwood, South Carolina. He was the 6th president of Morehouse College, and without Benjamin E. Mays, there would be no Martin Luther King Jr. And Benjamin E. Mays once said, "In all things that you do them so well that no man living, dead, or yet to be born can do them better." And see, that's the definition of excellence. That's the goal that we're trying to attain on our journey. And when you get there, you may not be rich and you may not be famous, and your name may not be in lights, but somebody somewhere, maybe even Dr. King, will be able to tell you, job well done. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Ooh, these lights are bright. All right. How's everybody doing? All right, good evening. My name is Rebecca Harkless, and I serve as the director of the Harvey and Lucinda Gant Multicultural Center, and I also had the privilege of serving as the chair of the MLK committee. And so I want to thank the committee again for their hard work in putting on this program. So can we give them a round of applause? Thank you again, Bakar, for your inspiring words. As a girl from Alabama, I really appreciated the South Carolina history, so now I can really appreciate my new home in South Carolina, so thank you so much for your words. I also just want to acknowledge the gospel choir. A lot of them had to leave and go to other obligations, but I want to thank the gospel choir again, because didn't they set it off for us? Shout out to the gospel choir. Y'all look good and y'all sounded good. And I also want to thank Anthony and Tiana for also their participation in tonight's program. So thank y'all so much. So let's give another round of applause for everyone that participated in this program. And also, let's give another round of applause for our award winners. I feel so lucky to be in community with each of you. Thank you so much for being here. So I just want to challenge us as we conclude tonight's program, let's carry forward the spirit of unity, justice, and equality that Dr. King advocated for throughout his life. Let us reflect on the profound legacy of a man who envisioned a world where unity and community prevailed. Dr. King's dream was not just about individual rights, but about the strength that emerges when we come together as one. Thank you, and have a good night.